In this section, we are going to work on the second factor that leads you to choose a partner, which are the expectations that others have of you. If you notice, in the previous section, we worked on a factor that arose from your internal world, from the unconscious, while here, the axis of influence focuses on your external world, in the society or culture in which you live. And this is because living in society, obviously your family, friends, or acquaintance are going to have certain expectations about you that you are going to try to fulfill. This is something that happens to all of us, because in our childhood or adolescence, when our ego state is blocked, it does not have enough strength to define, accept, and impose its own tastes in relation to the choice of a partner. An example of this could be the case of the person who tries to satisfy one of his parents for himself, to see himself in front of others and feel like a good son or daughter, depending on the case. Throughout these years, I have had some cases of people who got married not because they wanted to, but fundamentally because they thought that by doing so, they were satisfying what others expected of them. In fact, there are people who, without realizing it, marry someone who their mother or father likes. But the question arises, where is your own taste in a process like this? There are parents who are constantly telling their children the type of partner they should have, or they are even critical and even make fun of the partners their children choose. This is something that occurs especially in childhood, when you liked someone and your parents, due to their own complexes, began to make fun of you, precisely because of your choice of partner. And that is precisely what causes that voice to emerge in you over the years that is always telling you what will happen if you don't choose a partner that is to the taste of those people who made fun of you. The classic example of this, which you should surely know, is Romeo and Juliet. What happens to them when they dare to express their own taste in choosing a partner? The one that goes against family taste. Well, they end up dying for love. They end up being destroyed by families who in turn use them to meet family needs. Something that you can recognize in the case of Juliet, who they wanted to marry for a political and monetary issue. Now, what happens in your case? I want you to recognize how this external expectation of being a good son has defined your choice of a partner throughout your life. You could tell me, in reality, I have always looked for a partner different from what my parents expect of me. But if you look, this would be the second side of this same coin. You choose a partner motivated to rebel against what others expect of you, but still, the real partner you want for yourself remains hidden. That's why we are doing this exercise. So, I want you to think about how the expectation your family had of you, have determined the type of partner you have chosen. But remember that this is just a case of external expectation. Another case that affects everyone is that of satisfying my friends. Obviously, if you live in a social environment, your friends are going to have a certain influence on you. They will define, on an unconscious level, the type of partner you can or cannot have. I remember a case of a person who fell in love with someone and entered into a relationship with this young man, but what happened? Her friends began to make fun of the girlfriend, mainly because she came from a different cultural background than the one she came from. At one point, they even started to make fun of the clothes she was wearing and the way she spoke. That caused that client of mine to finally break up with his partner. Mind you, to satisfy his friends. And that caused him depression because deep down he wanted to be with that person. But unfortunately, because of those pressures, he ended up choosing a partner who fit what his friends expected of him. And it was a disaster because by satisfying his friends, he ended up denying his own desires. All of this, what I am talking to you about here, was something that he only became aware of thanks to the therapy he had with me. Until before that, he believed that he was in depression because he didn't have the kind of life he wanted. But thanks to the therapy, he realized that the real problem was the fact that he was in a relationship with which he did not feel happy. So, in your case, I want you to think and recognize what type of partners you have chosen motivated by the expectations that your friends had of you. Deep down, who did you stop loving because he didn't fit what others expected of you? And finally, we have the case of the social environment. Certainly, your neighbors or acquaintances have an influence on you. Even your work colleagues. If you look closely, they are not so important people to you. But when you don't have enough strength of character to overcome the opinions of others, at an unconscious level, this fear arises in you of what they will say if you interact with someone who is not going to meet those expectations. Sometimes neighbors talk about people just to satisfy their own boring lives. Then, the fact that you have a relationship or not becomes for others a matter in which everyone has to have an opinion. And that is a social force that could eventually cause you to choose a partner thinking more about them than about your own tastes. I had a case of a young woman who married someone because her neighbors wanted her to marry that person. They never allowed her to choose her partner, but she didn't realize that she was trapped in that social web. She only did it when we did therapy. In fact, she came to my consultation because she did not feel happy with her partner, but she did not understand why this was happening, if that person was so good to her. In the end, the issue arose that this couple had been imposed on her, because her neighbors wanted to live through her, the youthful relationship they had never had. You know, young people who know each other and had been sweethearts since childhood and who eventually get married. What everyone thinks is nice, but they don't stop to think if that is the best for those children or young people who, being very impressionable, don't think about whether they are doing their will or those of others. And for that reason, here what I want you to think is precisely how your acquaintances have influenced and continue to influence the way in which you choose a partner.